hereby call this meeting of the Norwood City Council to order. Please rise for the prayer and pledge of allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, as a body we congregate in this council chamber. We pray for thy divine guidance, that we may do all things well, according to thy holy will. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Williams, please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel.
Here.
Mr. Gabbard.
Here.
Mr. DeRacy.
Here.
Mr. Kelch.
Here.
Mr. DiNardo.
Here.
Mr. Thompson.
Here.
We have 6 members present, 1 absent. Moving on to item E, amendment of agenda. Item L3, I would like to move to, we'll move it to Q1. That's ordinance L3, move that to the Q1.
To which one? I'm sorry.
L3,
Yeah.
and we'll move it back just prior to excusing absent members and adjournment, so that'll be Q. We'll make that Q1 now. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we amend the agenda as stated.
Motion by Mr. Bonzo. May I have a second? Mr. DiNardo?
Yes, please.
Any discussion? Mr. Garrett, Tracy.
I'd just like to ask anybody watching to try and stay for after the Q1, please.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Anyone else? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. DeRacy.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yep.
All members present voting aye. The motion passes. Moving on to item F, August 24th, 2021 minutes. Mr. Thompson.
Move we receive and file the minutes.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to receive and file. Mr. DiNardo.
Second, please.
Second by Mr. DiNardo. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. DeRacy.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yep.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item H, requests to address council. I have several this evening. When I call your name, please come forward. You have 5 minutes and to speak and state the subject as well. First request is Lori Glenn.
Good evening. I'm Lori Glenn. I am the CEO of Centerpoint that opened up in the high school. And so I have come here tonight to address the council about supporting the tobacco retail license in the city of Norwood. And I'm out of breath because I just ran up the stairs. So the ordinance is aimed at addressing the youth tobacco use epidemic. If you recall, back in 2019, the Ohio General Assembly raised the tobacco sales age to 21. This was the federal government making 21 the tobacco sales age nationwide, and this occurred in December of 2019. While raising the tobacco sales age to 21, it was an important part of reducing youth access to tobacco products. Laws are only effective as they are enforced. Currently, federal and state enforcement efforts are proving to be inadequate at deterring tobacco retailers from selling tobacco products to underage youth. From January 2018, only 0.08% of Norwood's 24 tobacco retailers received a compliance check with 2 checks performed. Of the 2 inspections, both retailers failed and sold to minors. Under the current statute, lack of licensing, under the current statute, lack of licensing exists for vapor-only retailers, thereby creating a loophole for rogue businesses to sell these deadly products to our children without any oversight. A TRL for the city of Norwood will protect Norwood youth by filling the gaps in enforcement and increasing tobacco retailer compliance with local, state, and federal tobacco laws. Requiring every tobacco retailer in Norwood to get the license and renew it annually. Funding robust enforcement efforts through the annual retail license fee, including a minimum with one compliance check per year, and holding retailers accountable to the unlawful sales to youth throughout to graduated penalties and license suspension or revocation of repeated violations. We urge you to support this ordinance to establish a local tobacco retail license in Norwood. Your leadership is needed now more than ever to protect our kids from a lifetime of addiction. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next request to address council is Charlene Truss.
Good evening. My name is Charlene Truss, and I am one of the associate ministers at New Vision Missionary Baptist Church. We are located on the corner of Ivanhoe and Montgomery Road. We have been serving as in our food pantry ministry for roughly over a year, and we've fed roughly 8,000 members of this community and some of the outlying communities that connect to the Norwood community. And as we see approximately 250 to 300 families every Tuesday and Thursday in this Norwood community. And so through that, we see persons that come through our line, and a lot of them appear to be under the age of 21. And some of them have children. And as we see them come through our community, some of them are with child, some of them have children. And as we're serving them food and other toiletry items, we notice that they are vaping, they are using tobacco products as we're serving them the things that they need. And so we wanted to share that we are in support of the tobacco ordinance. And because we have firsthand knowledge of seeing what tobacco use is doing to our community. And so I'm also a member of ASAP Norwood. And so in that, we want to be able to give you firsthand knowledge of what we see in our communities. They're seeing young people using tobacco products that really don't have the ability to make the right choices of tobacco usage. And again, they're using the services that we're providing, but yet we have firsthand knowledge of seeing them underage using the products that are supposed to be for adult usage. And yet we need to have some type of ordinance here in the community to be able to give them some sort of guidance. And so I wanted to give you firsthand knowledge of what we're seeing in the community as we're serving the people of this great community.
Thank you.
I did have a quick question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I just had a hard time hearing you. What is the name of the church?
It's New Vision Missionary Baptist Church.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yes. Mhm.
Thank you all very much.
Yes. Are there any more questions? I'm sorry. Thank you.
I just wanted to make sure I had it in there right.
Yes.
Our next request to address council is Pastor Stanton Thomas.
Good evening to everyone. I am Pastor Stan Thomas. I serve as the senior pastor of the New Vision Missionary Baptist Church here in the city of Norwood. I'm here this evening to express my support for adding the ordinance chapter of 1761, the codified ordinance establishing a tobacco product sales and licensing program for the city of Norwood. We know that the tobacco industry spends at least $8.2 billion on marketing annually in the United States, and $383.2 million of those dollars are in Ohio alone. Further, published research studies have found that kids are twice as sensitive to tobacco advertising as adults, and are more likely to be influenced to smoke or vape by cigarette marketing than by peer pressure. 1/3 of the underage experimentation with smoking and vaping is attributed to tobacco company advertising. Also, much of this marketing is done at the point of sale with Norwood 21 retailers that are in the 3.1 square miles of Norwood, and 13 of those retailers are within walking distance from parks and schools. Reducing youth access to these products through a meaningful enforcement mechanism is critical. Before serving as a senior pastor, I served as a youth pastor for 5 years at my home church. And so I've seen this up front. I am the product also of a parent who smoked throughout my whole entire life. And so I know you all are familiar with things that are associated with that low birth weight, things of that nature, and how that impacts family lives and so far and so forth. But in my closing, I just would like to urge you to support, for you all to vote to adopt this licensing, because it is critical for our youth. Our young people face a mirror of things that are going on, and smoking is one of the things. If we can put something critical in place to help them make better decisions, this is their health that they're talking about. I don't know if many of you have seen commercials here recently where they are now becoming more aggressive with anti-tobacco advertising, where someone's the whole lung is gone. I don't know about you, but I don't want my children nor my grandchildren to have or experience that issue. So I thank you for your time, and thank you for your patience. God bless you.
Thank you. Next request to address council, Ms. Kalinda? How do you say
You
your
can
last
read
name?
my writing. Glenda A. Smith is my
Smith.
name, and I'm here to speak about the Glenda A. Smith Youth Sanctuary and what it has to offer the city of Norwood as well as the rest of Hamilton County. But I do want to say I support what the preceding speakers have said about smoking. The mission of the Glenda A. Smith Youth Sanctuary is to provide resources to children and families to maximize their potential. And we provide 3 services. The first one is a Zoom youth discussion series, and it meets once a week for 1 hour, and we talk about basic issues like who am I, why was I created, who is God. So it is biblically based. You can go to gasmithys.com website to find the meeting ID and passcode. And for every 4 sessions that a youth attends, they receive a gift card. The second thing that we do is we provide a gift card to anyone who states that they need food, gas, saline, a crock pot, a coat. And there is no criteria for that other than to fill out a sheet with your name, address, if you have one, because some people don't, and family size. So that's the only criteria for that. The third thing that we are doing is raising money to build a residential facility for homeless youth on property that has been allocated to us by our church. And there we'll teach faith, work ethic, and charity. And the reason why the Glenda A. Smith Youth Sanctuary was created is because I, Glenda A. Smith, was raised by a single parent and lived in public housing and received charity from various people, whether it was of their time or of their talents. And I would not have all the degrees that I have. I'm a practicing attorney by trade. I also have a master's in public affairs and other degrees, and a degree from the School of Hard Knocks. But I wouldn't have all those degrees without charity. So I don't want people to let their pride get in the way from asking, because nobody will make them feel bad. And they can go to gasmithys@gmail.com. I'm going to leave this information with council and with Maria so that she can post it if she wants to. And I'm trying to get in contact or have some person here on the ground in Norwood like I do in other areas where they'll just have the cards available here in Norwood when they're needed. So, are there any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you guys had a great parade. One day Smith Youth Sanctuary was in that, and we've been in it before, but. So,
Thank you.
pass those down, please.
Our next request to address council, Pastor Sonny James.
Well, good evening. Pastor Sonny James, 1830 Hopkins Avenue in beautiful Norwood, Ohio. It is such a pleasure to see so many eloquent peers and so many of the nice folk that I've had the pleasure of working with over the years. I come before you today really excited because, as most of you are aware, on August the 7th at our local pool, we had one of our prominent residents, the allegation, and this individual was appointed by our mayor to several high-profile positions in Norwood, repeatedly using and referencing the actual N-word. Ouch. And August the 7th, the last time I checked, was a long time ago. Yet, here we are getting ready to go into October, and as this individual referenced the word, whether she used the GA or the ER, in my culture, it's very, very inappropriate, very, very unacceptable, and just shouldn't be tolerated. But the thing that really got me is when she got kicked out of our pool. She says, and by the way, these are all documented statements by the staff. She was removed from the pool and she says, wait until city council and the mayor hears about this. Guys, I don't know about you, but we really, really need to get some things in order. I told you guys a few years ago that Barack Obama could go off and be the president of the United States of America. But I assure you, if he came into Norwood, he would be lucky to get himself a janitor's job, unless he agreed to come in under the status quo. I have attempted to work and work and work towards racial equity for years. In fact, in 2015, I spearheaded the effort to bring the Department of Justice into Norwood. And I want to make something clear. When we had our racial equity meeting, Mr. Braden, who's not here, said, oh, I was at that meeting. Well, that's funny, because no one controlled the guest list but me. And he wasn't on it. What I'm asking is that we begin to work together like never before. And why? We've got to begin to start going after those power threads that hide things behind closed doors. And so I was very honored to recently participate in the very first diversity panel. And I showed some of the council members tonight, the beautiful folks that are very, very much interested in saying no more status quo. And Mr. Mayor, I supported you, and I told people to support you. However, people are now sick and tired of the status quo and the same old, same old. If someone uses the actual N-word, And the response is wait until city council and the mayor hears about it. It should not take us, folks, more than a month to come together and address it. I haven't gotten one email. I've told you all, I was at a park. Mr. Thompson was there. And I was referred in the N-word 13 times. No one bothered calling the police. I wonder why. So I'm praying that you all embrace these residents that are coming together, because the agenda is really clear. Make life fair for everyone. And in my closing minute here, I want to help with something. Diversity training has got to start with each and every one of us. So let me help you out. Those of you watching that continue to say, Pastor James, I can talk to you privately, but if I talk publicly, they're going to come after me. Guys, we just need every child having the same equal opportunities. So I want you all listening to go and look up Dr. Robin DiAngelo, white fragility, and learn about diversity. Get some training. And then Carol Anderson, white rage. And when you hear those stories, and these are very eloquent educators, by the way,
Pastor
when you
James.
hear those stories,
Pastor James, your time is up. Thank you.
come on back and let's continue to talk at our next racial equity meeting. God bless you all.
Our next request to address council is Wendy Height.
Hello and good evening. I want to begin by saying thank you to the mayor and to the city council members for considering this important piece of legislation, the tobacco retail license. Particularly, I want to recognize the Law and Ordinance and Human Resource Committee for drafting such a thoughtful and meaningful piece of policy. It aims at providing the community with not just a meaningful license, but also and most importantly, some valuable protection, most importantly, education and prevention materials to provide our most valuable protection for our most valuable citizens of Norwood, its children. Now, I've been in front of council now since June several different times. And tonight, I'm not going to speak directly about the ordinance. What I'm going to speak and ask permission to do is to speak the words of the youth of Norwood. So we've had several students in the city of Norwood who have written letters of support. And I'd like to take my time, the remaining time, to read those letters to council this evening. Dear Norwood City Council, my name is Joshua and I live on Feldman Avenue. I am writing to express my support for adding an ordinance, Chapter 1761 of the Norwood City Codified Ordinance to establish a tobacco products sales license program in the city of Norwood. I support this law because I have two younger siblings who could be exposed to this in their high school years, and I don't want, if we don't enforce this as a community. Dear Norwood City Council members, my name is Leah, and I live on Kellingworth Avenue. I am writing to express my support for adding Ordinance Chapter 1761 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances to establish a tobacco product sales license program for the city of Norwood. This decision affects me personally because I have a relative who is now completely screwed mentally and physically because of the effect tobacco has taken on his life. My relative, now 18, was 14 when he began smoking cigarettes. It was incredibly easy, and it is incredibly easy for him. He has not gotten caught or ID'd, and because of that, he was able to keep going and use these products. Now he spends all of his money on tobacco, and it is constantly deteriorating him. In closing, I urge you to support and vote yes on adopting a tobacco product sales license for the city of Norwood. Thank you for your time and support. Leah. My name is Hallie, and I live on Section Avenue. I am writing to express my support for adding the ordinance Chapter 1761 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances to establish a tobacco products license program for the city of Norwood. Tobacco has messed up my life for as long as I can remember. I have always been in a home that has had tobacco or nicotine in it. I, as a 16-year-old child, have gone without many of the necessary items a child should have throughout their life. I have also seen my sister completely messed up her life and her child's life for these addictive things that so many should not have access to, but do. In closing, I urge you to support and vote yes in adopting the tobacco product sales license for the city of Norwood. Sincerely, Hallie. Dear City of Norwood City Council members, my name is Kiana, and I live on Elm Avenue. I am writing to express my support for adding Ordinance Chapter 1761 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances to establish a tobacco product sales license program for the city of Norwood. Tobacco has affected my life personally. I am 17 years old and I have a heavy nicotine addiction. I think back to when I didn't smoke and I wonder why it was so easy for me to get it in the first place. Would I never get winded going upstairs or having constant thoughts of a substance? I want to protect the younger generations not to have this problem. In closing, I urge you to support and vote yes on the tobacco product sales license, adding Chapter 1761 to Norwood Codified Ordinances. Thank you for your time and for your support. Sincerely, Kayana. I want to share these letters of support with council. You can read them. And I want to remind you all that this is not just for the generation that exists today, it's for future generations for the city of Norwood. Thank you for supporting this ordinance and taking the time to support our most valued citizens here in the city of Norwood.
Thank you, Mrs. Seifert. That concludes our request to address council. Moving on to item I, reports of standing committees of council, housing, health, and public spaces meeting, September 13th, 2021. Mr. Geraci.
Committee report, Housing, Health, and Public Safety, dated September 13th, 2021. To the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Housing, Health, and Public Safety, to whom was referred discussion with the Chronic Nuisance Task Force members, beg leave to submit the following report. The committee met expecting a discussion as to what the building department would like to add or what changes to be made. There wasn't any further progress. Mr. Kelch would work with the building department, Mr. Geraci would work with the health department, and Mr. Bonzo would work with the or a program to track chronic nuisance properties. Respectfully submitted, Mr. Matthew Geraci, Mr. Michael Gabbard, Mr. James Bonzo, and Mr. Chris Kelch. Mr. Gabbard was actually absent for this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Geraci. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that the committee report be received and filed.
Motion by Mr. Bonzo to receive and file the committee report. Mr. DiNardo.
A second, please.
Second by Mr. DiNardo. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item J1. Third reading of ordinances and resolutions. J1, ordinance adding Chapter 1761 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances to establish a tobacco product sales licensing program. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we have the third reading of the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonzo to have a third reading. Mr. Thompson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Mr. Geraci.
I do appreciate those coming out to speak on behalf of this. But the one thing that I didn't hear from many and that I still really haven't gotten an answer to regarding this is we're just assuming that underage children are purchasing these at the businesses. We don't have the evidence to show that they are. A lot of the letters that I did here showed that there were smokers in the family, showed that there's a history of smoking in the family. So, when I brought up two meetings ago, I guess it was at this point, that it needs to start in the home. We need to catch this in the home versus catching it in the retailers. I still stand by that. It's the home life that has to stop it. A lot of these kids, again, are still getting these products from friends, from family, from neighbors, buying a cigarette at a time or nicotine at a time from somebody standing outside of the store. These are things that we got to look at cracking down on and looking at focusing our efforts on is inside the home and what's going on with the family and friends. And a lot of the other information that I got from listening to some of the speakers is that something that myself and Mr. Kelch has been harping on is the vaping, the vape products. And I have seen the research for the vape products, and it is a lot more harmful than tobacco itself. And that's what we, myself and Mr. Kelch have been harping on, is that we need to crack down on the vape products because there is hardly any legislation for it. And that's where we should have started with this ordinance. While we are on the third reading of this ordinance, and I do support a portion of this ordinance, I think we should have started with the vape products and started legislation for that, and then had enough research either within the schools by anonymous surveys to find out where people are actually getting something like cigarettes or smokeless tobacco. But the vaping products, I absolutely 100% think that we should be cracking down on. That's the most harmful thing that has come out in the last 10 years.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. May we have the third reading, Mrs. Williams?
Ordinance adding Chapter 1761 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances to establish the Tobacco Products Sales Licensing Program.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bonzel?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonzel to pass the ordinance. May I have a second? Mr. DiNardo?
Yes, please.
Any further discussion? Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, just to clarify, I'd like to ask the representative from the Health Department a question real quickly. Thanks. Does this cover vaping products, nicotine products that come in vape form?
Yes, the definition basically says tobacco product and nicotine products together.
Okay. Thank you. That was all the question.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Tracy?
All right. So our law director, Mr. Moore, had brought that over to me. I understand that this covers vaping. I'm trying to figure out how people are not understanding that the point of my speech was start this with vape, not include everything, including vapor. The point of my whole thing was let's start with vapor and then let's move up. I understand that this includes vapor, but let's start with vapor and let's move up because, like I said, most of what we're having problems with right now is the vapor. And social media is spreading that wildfire for vaping. And if that's what we need to crack down on first, because that's our biggest concern right now, that's what we need to look at first and initially start that program there and then move our way into tobacco and other products. It's not that I don't understand that this doesn't include that. I absolutely 100% understand that. but this should have just been vapor to start with.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Mr. DiNardo?
My question is an attempt to try to figure out what's the downside in including all products. And I imagine one of the reasons that I heard last time was money. But at the time, I heard you talk about the ordinance in general. So if the argument would be, I want to only isolate vaporized nicotine products and not all nicotine products, the way this is written is the cost of enforcement would be the same. Bar, I think 13 of the 14 or something like that had vape products in the stores. So I'm still going to have to do the checks. And so I'm still going to have to expend the same amount of money. So it's not a cost downside. So what's the downside in your mind of not including all of it? Because it can't be money.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Mr. Tracy?
Through the chair to Mr. DiNardo. So if we had started with a vapor product only, that may show stores that don't want to participate in this ordinance, or meaning they don't want to pay the fees for the vapor product licensing. They may not sell that license. They may not sell that product. So it may be limited to the vape stores only. So things like UDF, Speedway, what else do we have? Sunoco. They may not sell the vapor products anymore because they don't want to pay that fee. So it would be down to just the vape stores at that point saying, okay, if I want to stay in business, I'm going to have to pay this fee and I'm going to have to be checked. That's where I see the advantage of starting with the vape, is to let's see if we can get it out of the stores first and see how this program goes as a pilot program, and then move into the nicotine, the cigarettes, the smokeless tobacco, whatever else it may be, and amend this ordinance later down the road for that.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Any further discussion? Mr. Kelch?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to try to keep it pretty short and sweet. I'm not voting yes on this. And this is why. I think it's just kind of essentially it's an extra tax on businesses to sell something that's already legal, that they already pay taxes and register with the state to sell. I think it's useless legislation, and this is why, because we already have state statutes. I'm sorry that it's not enforced to the liking of some, but it's there. Doing this, I'm sorry. I do coach in the neighborhood. I see a lot of different children. Though I appreciate groups like yours and those that came on and spoke tonight, and the advocacy that you guys do to try to, have children not smoke or try these products. Usually that's left up to us coaches, volunteer and paid, to kind of educate the children on this. I mean, what would be more beneficial than this extra piece of legislation, or this, tax to our small businesses that just try to make a living selling legal products, would be groups such as yours, coaches, parents, getting together to discuss these things and education on these kind of products. Go to sports games, go to practices, talk to people. Don't just talk to them when they come into your thing. Go out to their thing. And to me, that's more beneficial than this. This might very well pass. We'll see in about probably 2 minutes, if not less, but I just don't, and if it does, congratulations, but I don't think this is going to have any impact in the way you want it to. That's just, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kelch. Anyone else? Mr. Tracy?
I would like to ask that if this does pass, I would like to request the health department keep track of statistics. How many, not just how many citations have been put out to the businesses, not just how many businesses have failed, how many times the businesses have sold, but I'd like to see statistics on from people under 21, how they're getting the tobacco. Has this actually had an impact on our city? Has the rate of smoking for under 21 dropped in a year's time period? Hopefully, I'm back here on this council next year and I can be able to hear those results. I would like to find out if this has any impact at all, if it does pass. And, you know, I wish it would have started with the vaping products and hammered that and actually gotten the legislation that we need for that product versus going after everything. Seems like we need to put an umbrella on everything.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Anyone else? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Dracy?
No.
Mr. Kelch?
No.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
All members present voting, we have 4 ayes, 2 noes. Motion passes. May we have, we already did that, right?
Yep.
My bad, thank you. We'll move on. Item J2, an ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into an agreement with Paycor Incorporated to provide payroll processing, payroll tax filing, and related services to the City of Norwood and declaring an emergency. Mr. Thompson.
Move we have the third reading of this ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to have the third reading. Mr. DiNardo.
Yes, please.
Second by Mr. DiNardo. Any discussion? No discussion, then we'll call the roll. Please call the roll.
That was the third reading, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Dracy?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
All members present voting aye. The motion passes. May we have the third reading?
An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into an agreement with Paycor Incorporated to provide payroll processing, payroll tax filing, and related services to the City of Norwood and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Thompson.
Move we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to pass the ordinance. Mr. DiNardo.
Second, please.
Second by Mr. DiNardo. Any discussion? Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Dracy?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item L, introductory reading of ordinances and resolutions. Item L1, a resolution declaring the month of October 2021 to be Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Norwood, Ohio. Mr. Thompson.
Move we have all 3 readings.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to have all 3 readings. Mr. Kelch.
Second.
Second by Mr. Kelch. Any discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
Yeah, I would like to make an announcement that there are, excuse me, mobile mammogram units that will be around and even in the Norwood area. I do not know for sure if these things cost, if they're free, but there is a phone number here. October 14th at 8 a.m., they'll be at the Oakley Kroger over on Marburg. October 27th at 8 a.m., they'll be over in our Rookwood Commons. And on October 29th from 9 to 2, they'll be here at our Norwood Walgreens. You can call for more information and to schedule your walk-in mammogram would be 686-3300. Once again, that's 686-3300. We really would encourage all to take those few moments, make that call, find out the costs and work those things out. But to get tested, I'm sure everybody on this council and administration has been affected by breast cancer of some sort. And so I would highly encourage you to go get tested and just make sure that you're being on top of all your health care needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Anyone else? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Thank you.
Mr. Gabbard?
Sorry, yes.
Yes. Sorry. Mr. Dracy?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
All members present voting aye. The motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all 3 readings?
An ordinance, sorry. A resolution declaring the month of October 2021 to be Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Norwood, Ohio. A resolution declaring the month of October 2021 to be Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Norwood, Ohio. A resolution declaring the month of October 2021 to be Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the city of Norwood, Ohio.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we pass the resolution.
Motion by Mr. Bonzo to pass the resolution. Mr. Thompson?
Second.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr.
Mr. Bonzo, please.
Yeah. I just wanted to thank you, President Merkel, for bringing this to us and asking this to be presented. So I think it's a great thing. Thank you.
We have a motion by Mr. Bonzo, second by Mr. Thompson to pass the resolution. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the resolution passes. Moving on to item L2, ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Regent Avenue Street Repair Project from Williams Avenue to south terminus of Regent Avenue within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Bonzo?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we have all three readings of the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonzo to have all three readings. May I have a second? Mr. Kelch.
Second.
Second by Mr. Kelch. Any discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
Just probably a question through to the mayor. Do you know, is this for a spring project, or is this something that we hope to still get in sometime this year? I don't think so.
It won't be this year. This is spring, both this street but we've moved up you might recall in years past, we had really late fall projects with paving. We had a lot of paving going on right after the school started. We had a lot of paving going on in the city. We've pushed that up now to where it's spring, that we've got it all, and we try to have all of our paving projects completed prior to school starting back up. The goal is to have the streets and all that equipment and everything out of the way. So this is one, and then the other one would be Slane that we're trying to come at you with here soon also.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you,
Follow up.
Mr. Gabbard.
Not as far as this ordinance goes, I had a question that someone wanted to ask about the park up at Tower Park. Or is there any, since they just did Indian Mound, wanted to see if that would maybe be in the works in the future?
We actually worked to try to get that included in that whole paving project, but we were not successful in making that happen. There potentially are some things that could go on up there in the future. I mean, potentially we'll be removing a water tower. We'll be dismantling a water tower. So there are some major changes that could happen up there. And we're going to continue to look at how we can get that area paved because it's a mess. And we've got Tower Park up there. There's an old tennis court up there. It's been sort of one of our, I won't say neglected parks, but because it's hard to get to, but there's a lot of effort that will be put into that over the next couple of years to enhance that whole area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Mr. Geraci.
Question through the chair to the mayor. This states grant and loan. How much of this is actually grant money?
Mr. Mayor.
I think that we are looking at, I think the number was 800,000. So it's a split right down the middle of what we'll be doing with this. I'm pretty sure it was around 800,000.
And this is to replace the lead water lines and repave their street, correct?
No. It will do some service lines and curb boxes, but I don't think it's replacing every one of them. That would be a better question for Superintendent Zimmerman. So if you want, I'll have him give you a call tomorrow, and Clint can get you up to speed on what service lines will be taken care of there. He's probably watching this, scratching, going, but I can have him give you a yell on that.
Okay.
Clarify that.
I just wanted to make sure that if they were going to dig out, that they were going to replace that street as well.
Yeah.
Mr. Bonzo.
I can't imagine that the cost of the project being so high, or the estimated cost, that they're not even replacing the sewer lines too and splitting it up and splitting the storm sewer from the regular. I mean, it's a very expensive project for just doing the street itself.
splitting the combined
I mean,
sewers?
that's what we've done, that's what we've done on, like, a lot of these other streets where we do the Ohio Public Works Commission loan program. A lot of the times when they do that, like Williams Avenue, for example, between, well, I mean, pretty much all of, I guess, Williams Avenue between Montgomery and then the Xavier area, when they did those, they split the sewers up. So like they put new storm sewer things in, they put a new storm sewer line. So it seems like a very expensive project for just street replacement. But
Lead service lines is an expensive project. You add that to a rehab, and they're talking curbs and sidewalks or not sidewalks, but there's a lot to what's just written on here without that. But that's a better question for Clint. If you want absolute clarification on it, Clint can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzo. Anyone else? Mr. Tracy?
Is there a deadline on this?
Is that a question to the mayor?
Question
sir?
through the chair to the mayor.
Mr. Mayor?
No, I don't. I think we're okay if you wanted to do 2 readings tonight and then get clarification from Clint and then do the last reading, I don't think that would be a challenge.
And that's fine with me if
Mr.
you all
Bonzo?
wanted to do that. I don't know who the second was.
Mr. Kelch?
I'd amend.
So, motion by Mr. Bonzo, second by Mr. Kelch to have 2 readings? Is that correct, Mr. Bonzo?
Yeah, 2 readings. Yes,
2
sir.
readings, okay.
Appreciate it.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yep. All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have 2 readings?
Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Regent Avenue Street Repair Project from Williams Avenue to the south terminus of Regent Avenue within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Regent Avenue Street Repair Project from Williams Avenue to the south terminus of Regent Avenue within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Moving on to item M, administrative reports. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Talking about street repairs and what streets have been done and what streets have not. I talked to Councilman Braden about calling a streets committee meeting, asked him to do that, and I think when he returns, he'll be calling one of those so that we can go through and make sure that everybody's on the same page. We've been working on quite a few different grants and trying to work with OPWC. We were recently successful in being awarded a grant from SORTA for $765,000 that will be utilized on Montgomery Road. We'll also work that in with the OPWC money, which is the funding for repaving, ultimately the state route. I mean, 22 and 3 Montgomery Road is a state route, so that's a big project. We do have some conceptual plans being worked on right now for Montgomery Road through JMA, and I hope that we'll be able to get that in front of council soon also. Design plans to try to look at ways that we can improve Montgomery Road when we do this paving project. There have been we've seen a couple of different groups come to us with ideas and suggestions on what could be done, but no real engineering plans and no real sort of engineers' estimates on it that helps you guys provide guidance to the administration. So we hope to have that coming soon. We did hear that in 2024, they're planning on doing a major rehab of 562, the Norwood Lateral. And with that rehab, they're planning on shutting down the east lanes of Norwood Lateral for a period of time, and then shutting down the west lanes of Norwood Lateral for a period of time. So we went back to them, and I think I already mentioned at a council meeting before that we went back to ODOT and said, if you're going to do that, we can't pave Montgomery Road and have a state route in a terrible shape when you're shutting down such a critical artery. So hopefully we're getting the Montgomery Road stuff expedited. We'll see if that works out. But I know everybody's happy to have Montgomery Road and 562 and the state routes done and all that, but it all comes down to residential streets. And we are working to continue the residential stuff, and hopefully at our discussion, when the streets committee meets, we can discuss what streets need to be done and what kind of funding. Really, it all comes down to what council will approve and what kind of long-term funding we can get in place to continue the progress that we're making on street improvements. So that is absolutely, on the horizon, and we recognize that. The other part is looking at parks, and quite frankly, I've been to a couple of our parks and looked around at the work that's been done in them, and it's great. The buildings, buildings that we know are not that old, a fresh coat of paint and some new doors because they've been beaten up, and just cleaning them up has really made a big difference, and our parks are really starting to get there, but there's still a lot more work to do. They are starting to work on Waterworks Pool. There's some concrete surface areas that need to be taken care of. There's new doors going in. The doors have been there since 1972, and they're rusty doors, and they're around water all summer, and there was some pretty bad doors there. So we've gotten those replaced. All of that is expensive. I'd like to say that replacing doors isn't that expensive, but all of that work is expensive. But it makes a difference, and Waterworks looks a lot nicer than it did, and next summer it's going to look even nicer. We are working at the rec center, trying to get a few more things completed. We just signed for an engineering study that will help us with ADA compliance. And this is all the path that we have to go down, and we're going to go down as we make that building more accessible to all. But that'll give us some guidance on that, and you'll see some of those numbers coming at you in the budget as we're working to get the budget together, and some explanations on why we're going those ways. The basketball courts, the equipment's back in. The community center basketball court looks great. You might recall that floor was resurfaced in 2019. We really didn't even make it to a basketball season there before COVID struck. So that court looks great. We've got new backboards up in there. There's been some really, I think you'll be happy when you see that, when if you're there, if you're coaching, or if you've got your kids on teams, that's really, there's a lot of improvements there. And that's about it. I want to go into I'd like for you guys to go into executive session so we can discuss the safety service director position. And the candidate for that is here, so we could, if necessary, you guys can invite him into the discussion also. But there's some staffing changes that are going on at the city that are, in my opinion, are just huge leaps ahead. I mean, the fact that Keith Hamrick has started working as our HR, as Human Resources Director, Human Resources Manager, and he's really pushed us forward, and he's really provided a great resource for the guys who are making decisions about human resources. And so when our chiefs need some support, yes, we've always had a third-party provider, but nobody who had a real good insight into the city of Norwood stuff. So I think we're moving in a strong, good direction there. I think that what you passed earlier, taking us on to Paycor, I think that is a huge, huge advancement from where we were till starting January 1st. That's going to be a huge one also. So we're making strides. We've still got areas to improve, but we are making strides, and I think that the administration is running better all the time. So.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any questions for Mayor? Mr. Bonzo?
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Mr. Mayor, so we passed the Montgomery Road corridor, kind of our plan, essentially. It's not like a requirement, but it's kind of where we were aiming. So that has a lot of change, like decent number of changes to, just where the paving markers are. It might add more permanent parking in some places. It takes out a lane in some places. Are you do you intend to try to implement some of that in this, or do you intend just to kind of keep it as is for now with this repaving project?
Absolutely. We intend to try to put, a lot of those plans are,
that plan is good. Now we've got to put it on paper. Now we've got to engineer it out, and that's what I was talking about earlier. Actually putting pen to paper and then looking at the total cost of those things and getting that in front of council to approve and provide guidance and help everybody understand this is what we're trying to do. So that mini planning for that portion of Montgomery Road is absolutely it's a blueprint for what we need to do. Now we need to really put plans, and the big part is some engineering numbers. How much is it going to cost? It's all great, if it might look great on paper and you might have this great idea, but we do have constraints in what we can do financially. I mean, there's only so much we can do. So what does it cost? And then maybe we have to trim it down and we say, this isn't going to happen right now because, yes.
That's great, thank you.
Short answer is yes, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Boswell. Anyone else have any questions for Mayor Schneider? Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Moving on to item N, unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business this evening? Anyone? We'll move on to, new business. Any new business? Mr. Dracy.
I'd like to try and call a Housing, Health, and Public Safety Committee next Tuesday to discuss the, chronic nuisance ordinance. Kind of try and get an update on where we're at.
Next Tuesday, what time, Mr. Dracy?
Say 7:30.
7:30 here?
Here.
What's that date? What is next Tuesday?
October 5th
October 5th. Okay.
at 7:30?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Dracy.
Thank you.
Any other new business? Anyone? Thank you. Then we'll move on to item P, communications. Item P1, Ohio Division of Liquor Control regarding 10 Lizzie, Cincinnati, operating LLC, doing business as Ford's Garage.
My office received a notice to legislative authority from the Ohio Division of Liquor Control. This is similar to the same notice that we received or have received about a variety of different other businesses. This one is in regard to Tin Lizzie Cincinnati Operating LLC, doing business as Ford's Garage. That's that new restaurant going in over in Rookwood Commons.
Yes.
It's another one of these where we need to advise the state whether we would like to request a hearing or not, and I just need to mark whether we want to do that. I know that whenever we get these, Liz sends out an email to the department heads to see if anybody has any objection, and if there was an objection, then she would have let us know. But so since we didn't hear anything, it doesn't look like there's any objections received.
Wait, everybody. Okay, Mr. Dracy.
He can start. Mine's probably going to be a harder question, so.
This, just to add a point of clarification, this is going in where the old Don Pablo's was. It's a pretty big restaurant, and they don't put these very close together. So it should be a nice attraction, hopefully draw people to Norwood just to come and visit that restaurant, if nothing else. And I would like to make, we have a motion yet?
No motion yet.
I'd like to make a motion that we receive and file the letter and not have any, what am I saying here?
Request. No objection.
No objections, that's it. Couldn't think of it.
Motion by Mr. Gabbard to receive and file with no objections. May I have a second? Mr. Bonzo?
I'd like to second. Thank you.
Second by Mr. Bonzo. Any discussion? Mr. Tracy, you said you had a question?
Nope.
Nope.
Mr. Gabbard answered it for me. I was just going to ask what it was.
Okay,
Or
great.
is.
It's if I may, it's a restaurant. I happen to see one down in Florida. They're known for their, hamburgers. It's supposed to be really tasty. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it.
I was looking at it going, okay, yeah.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, this is, really, really exciting what's going to be happening there, because from what I've heard, there's going to actually be a car suspended from the ceiling, or 2 cars. So, I mean, essentially, it's going to be a really good attraction, exactly like Mr. Gabbard hinted at. I think this will be I think they might be building one in Indianapolis, but for the most part, like as the clerk, Mrs. Williams said, they're pretty much only in Florida. I mean, they're like vacation kind of destinations that people, go to these places when they're at. So cool thing is, I think it'll be a regional attraction that you'll have people coming in to visit it, and that's only good for the city. So excited about it.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Anyone else? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
All members present, voting aye, motion passes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
I mean, if I could just, by chance, I'm sorry that this did not happen in new business. I would like to make a motion for, if Mr. DiNardo is available, that we have an economic development meeting at 7:30 on Monday. So essentially, yeah, just we'll have that meeting, and there's a applicant for a CRA that really we need to get that processed. So
What was the date, Mr. Bonzo?
Monday, October 4th at
7:30.
7:30.
October 4th, right here at 7:30?
Yes, please.
Thank you, sir.
Are you available, Mr. DiNardo?
No, but I'm trying to see if I can do the 5th beforehand, like right beforehand. Would that be easy?
Yeah, you mean before the health one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be like 6:30 then?
Can I just email you or talk right
The
after
problem is we actually need to do it, because we're not, there's just a issue that's going to come up that'd be good to have it done now before we leave the meeting today.
before they do the meeting today?
Yeah. So maybe if you can think about it, maybe we'll make a motion at the end, so.
Okay.
The meeting, okay, I'll withdraw my motion. Please.
Hang tight.
Thank you.
I got you.
Excellent, then we're moving on.
Yes, thank you.
May I have a motion to go into executive session? You have that? Thank you, sir. Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, I would like to move to go into executive session to consider the appointment, employment, and/or compensation of a public employee or official.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. May I have a second?
If you'd like the Human Resources Director or the applicant themselves, do you want anybody other than who's sitting here to stay? It's got to be part of the motion as well.
Can you invite them in after the
Or you can
motion?
invite them in after, yes, you can do
Okay,
that.
we'll invite in after the motion.
Motion by Mr. Thompson. May I have a second? Mr. Gabbard?
Make the second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
All members present, voting aye. We are now in executive session at 8:38. (9:59), we're out of executive session. Moving on to item Q1, ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an employment agreement with Noah E. Powers III to serve as Safety Service Director and declaring an emergency. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we have all three readings of the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzo. Mr. Gabbard.
Second that.
Second by Mr. Gabbard. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
No.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yep.
All members present voting, we have 5 ayes and 1 no.
Okay. So,
Motion fails. Mr. Bonzo.
thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we have 2 readings of the ordinance.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Bonzel, second by Mr. Gabbard to have 2 readings. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
All members present voting aye. The motion passes. May we have 2 readings?
Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an employment agreement with Noah E. Powers III to serve as Safety Service Director and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an employment agreement with Noah E. Powers the third, to serve as Safety Service Director and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bonzo?
Thank you, Mr. President. We do need to schedule, or actually, do we have something? I want to yield the floor.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes, I'd like to just take a couple minutes to announce that with a heart that's excited and a little scared, and tonight will be my last council meeting. I will be resigning this council effective September 31st, which I think is Thursday, that evening, to take another position with my city. And they got to do this. So I want to, first of all, thank my family. Thank them for all the support that they've given me and backing. All of our families sacrifice a lot because of meetings and other meetings, and then another meeting, and then events and appearances and campaigning. So our families deserve all of our thankfulness and our praise. And I want to thank this council. This was my 5th council that I've had the privilege to be a part of, and undoubtedly the best. And I say that because this was a council, and even though we have moments that we've had, as was spoken earlier, spirited discussion, we've had quite a lot of that. We've had lots of debate that we disagree with one another, but we work through things. And it wasn't on party lines. It wasn't for no other reason that everybody here fought for what they thought or how they thought something should go or how a vote should go. And for that, I'm greatly appreciative. This council needs to be very proud of itself. This council we were able to approve and agree upon all 4 of our major contracts in the city. We had our first recognition of Pride Month in our city. The first recognition of Black History Month in our city, which I think speaks volumes that we are moving towards a more diverse city, more inclusive city, that everybody can feel welcome here. We've upgraded parks. Parks have been neglected for over 10 years. And we've started plans on upgrading our park system, which people are noticing and taking heed to, which is pretty cool. We've repaved and started a street program. We've repaved at least 7 streets. A lot of our city lots that are associated with our departments, some auxiliary areas, and that's all been a part of this council. I'm going to use the M word here, but we passed a mural ordinance to begin that process, that we could look at maybe bringing murals into Norwood. We have a playing card site that has started, and there's still a lot of work to be done on that, but this council can be proud of when that new project opens up. It's going to be pretty cool. And we've also, probably our greatest accomplishment is we are really close to getting out of fiscal emergency. And so this council needs to be proud. And that's everybody that sits on this in these seats, I know has worked hard to fight for what they thought was right. And all these things I listed are results of that. And there's been many other things as well. I want to thank the administration for always answering calls, texts, messages, and truly trying to work with council to do what's best for our city. And then least, but definitely not least, the most important, I want to thank our citizens. Our citizens gave me an incredible privilege, an incredible honor to be their representative. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. And I want to thank them. I'm sorry for getting emotional, but I really do love what I do. I love being a representative. But I'm leaving to move into a different position within the city. So although I won't be sitting in this seat worrying about passing a budget or passing legislation, I still get the honor and the privilege to serve the Gym in the Highlands. And I appreciate that. So with that, I say thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm hoping that we can have a couple of minutes to say a few things. I just want to thank Mr. Gabbard for his service and for his experience, for his friendship, for his advice, for his good decision-making and steady hand, at the helm. Mr. Gabbard's not one that gets emotional, often, especially not when, the stakes are high. This is a different case. But he takes it in, he listens, he, processes before he goes out and gives his opinion. And it's something, we had the same thing with Mr. Clark, and I've appreciated having Mr. Gabbard next to me as well for the last 2 years. I think Mr. Gabbard's going to be extremely missed on this council, but I am very happy to hear that he will still be serving the citizens. So I do want to wish you a congratulations and a thank you for that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Tracy.
Mr. Gabbard, you and I, we have gone toe to toe.
Yes.
Many times. But the one thing that I do remember was you coming to me and talking to me about you running for office with this council. And I absolutely had no qualms with it. And it was absolutely incredible for me to have the learning experience from you. I got a lot from watching my grandmother, obviously, but you added on to that.
She taught me.
And it's been incredible serving with you. And I think we really had a good group because how many years has it been since you've seen a fiery council? How many years has it been that we've had multiple people, including yourself, bring up valuable questions without just rubber stamping something? And that's something that I hope continues in the future, no matter who's sitting in that seat, is that we look to ask questions just as you did. And, I'm absolutely 100% grateful that I got to sit next to you for the 2 years that I did, or 1 3/4 years that I did, because throughout those years, I've learned a lot from you. And it's been great. And I wish you all the best at the next position. And hopefully you'll still see me sitting here.
Thank you, man.
So,
Appreciate it.
enjoy, and hopefully it'll be a long career.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Mr. Kelch.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Gabbard's going to keep it short and sweet, Mr. Gabbard. All right, you did it right. You didn't screw the people. You're a great leader, great representative. You're going to do nothing but good things and have success. I just want to wish you the best of luck. You know, without you on this council, we probably would be lost at times and we'd be fighting a little too much. You know, so bringing us back to center a lot of times, often, with your common sense, your experience, your leadership, that's definitely going to be missed. But you got to move on to the new chapter. You're going to do a great job, and I wish you nothing but the best. And I think we all, you know, wish you very good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelch.
Thanks for your steadiness.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. In light of Mr. Gabbard's resignation this evening, I'd like to call a special meeting next Tuesday. I know we have
Is it Monday?
Tuesday the 5th.
Is that when your meeting is too?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have two.
For some reason I thought it was Monday, that's why.
So Tuesday the 5th, Mr. Geraci's at 7:30. What time we?
8:30.
8:30?
Yep.
Want to do 8:30? Okay, so we'll have a special meeting at 8:30.
And then we also need two things on the agenda will be the third reading of the ordinance for NOAA powers, and then, or I'd say that would be the second item. The first item would be replacing Mr. Gabbard. Yep.
And was that everything for next Tuesday? Just
Yeah,
those
I'll make
two?
I was gonna say, as soon as you're done, I'll make a motion for the economic development.
Mr. Bonzo.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we schedule an Economic Development Committee meeting for Tuesday at 9 p.m. here in council chambers to discuss a pending CRA application.
Okay. Do you have all that?
Hold on. Tuesday at 9 p.m.?
9 p.m.
Are we sure we want to do 9 p.m.?
We are positive. We're going to do it all in one night.
Is that it, gentlemen? So we're squared away for next
Well,
Tuesday?
we need a second then, I think. We need to make a motion. Can somebody second that?
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Bonzo, second by Mr. Thompson. That's to have the economic.
Yep.
9 p.m.
The motion was for what?
To schedule an Economic Development meeting.
Oh, we needed a motion for that?
Well, Mr. Gabbard's not going to be chair, so I'd rather just make sure
Oh, okay.
it happens.
Okay.
And the second was Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mr. Bonzo.
Yeah, just one additional item. I was hoping they might be able to add it to that special meeting. We do need to adjust the committees. So I think that if we could just have a topic on there to change our standing committees of council so that we can assign a new chair to economic development and then assign whoever the new council member is to the committees, probably that Mr. Gabbard's was on.
That's right.
Okay, we can add that on. So we'll have 3 items for the special meeting. Thank you, Mr. Bonzo. Anyone else? Then we'll move on to excuse absent members. May I have a motion to excuse absent members? Mr. Gabbard.
Make a motion, we excuse the absent member.
May I have a second? Mr. Kelch.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. May I have a motion for adjournment?
Please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yeah, I move we adjourn.
Mr. DiNardo.
Second, please.
Second by Mr. DiNardo. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yep.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. We are adjourned.